I won't start with comfort, and I won't start with fear. Let me start with the most forbidden idea. What if death isn't an end, but simply a sidestep, a quantum relocation to another universe? Think about it. Our brains are trained to see existence as linear. You're born, you live, you die, full stop. But physics, real physics, has been whispering for decades that the universe might not play by those rules. Take the many worlds interpretation, first proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957. It suggests that every possible outcome of every event really happens, not in imagination, but in parallel realities. You flip a coin. Its heads here, tails somewhere else. You survive an accident here, but in another thread, you don't. This isn't science fiction. It's one of the most respected attempts to make sense of quantum mechanics. Now here's the unsettling leap. If every possibility exists somewhere, what does it mean for the one possibility we fear most? Our own death. Could it be that consciousness, instead of vanishing, simply slides into the timeline where it continues? Maybe death is less like a wall and more like a door, one that doesn't close but simply opens into a different room you never knew existed. This isn't about religious comfort or fantasy. It's about asking, what if the ultimate taboo, death, isn't a finality, but just a transfer of awareness? If that's true, then every single one of us is already immortal in ways we can't comprehend. But if that's true, it also means something darker. We might never escape the burden of self. So, let's go deep, because to ask this question is to shake the very foundations of science, philosophy, and what it means to be human. To even imagine death as a transition instead of an end, we need to unpack the strange machinery of quantum mechanics. At its core lies one of the most unsettling truths. Particles don't follow one path, they follow all possible paths until observation forces them into a single state. This is the infamous superposition. An electron isn't here or there, it's here and there until we look. Now apply that to life. Your consciousness, your very sense of I am, is bound to the physical states of your brain. Neurons fire, quantum processes hum beneath, and out of that orchestra emerges awareness. But if the physical world itself exists in a spread of possibilities, why should consciousness be tied to just one? Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation proposes that every quantum outcome happens, each in its own universe. You don't just live one timeline. You live in a vast branching cosmos of alternatives. Here's where things get radical. Suppose in one universe your body fails. The neurons shut down, the heart stops, the system collapses. From the perspective of that branch, you die. But in another, equally real branch, maybe a tiny fluctuation saves you. A neuron fires differently. A clot dissolves. A cell resists collapse. In that universe, your consciousness doesn't end. And since you can never experience your own non-existence, your awareness would always find itself continuing in the surviving branch. This isn't saying you magically resurrect in the same world. It's saying that from your subjective point of view, reality seamlessly continues in the version where you didn't die. Death, then, becomes not annihilation, but redirection, a quantum transfer of perspective. Of course, critics argue this stretches Everett's idea beyond physics into philosophy. After all, many worlds doesn't guarantee personal survival, it just describes universes branching. But here's the provocative question. If every possibility exists, why would the death possibility be the only one you experience? Isn't it more likely that, from your first-person view, you only ever ride the timelines where you remain alive? If that's true, the implications are staggering. Death never arrives for you. It always happens in some other universe, to some other version. But that would mean something terrifying too. You're locked in an endless sequence of survival, shifting from one timeline to the next, always continuing, never truly gone. And that raises the real cliffhanger. If death is just a change of universe, does immortality come not as a gift, but as a trap? Everything in our everyday intuition screams that death is final. We see bodies decay, memories fade, and life stop. Common sense says, when the lights go out, they don't turn back on. But common sense has always been a poor guide to quantum reality. After all, common sense once told us the Earth was flat, that time flowed the same everywhere, and that particles were tiny billiard balls, not probability clouds. Reality has a habit of making fools of our instincts. So let's break the illusion. When we think of death, we assume there is a clean cut, a before and after. One moment awareness, the next moment nothing. But consciousness isn't a light bulb that flicks on and off. It's a process embedded in physical laws that don't respect our intuition. If quantum physics suggests all possibilities exist, then the absolute void of nothing may not be accessible to a subjective observer. You can't experience the absence of experience. By definition, you can only ever experience continuation. Here's a scenario. Imagine you're driving late at night. On one highway in one universe, you doze off and crash instantly. In another, just a quantum hair's breadth different. Your eyelids snap open in time, and you swerve to safety. For the outside world, both are real outcomes. But for you, which one are you inside? The disturbing suggestion is this. You only ever find yourself in the version where you survive. The other outcomes happen, but they don't contain the thread of your awareness. That would mean your sense of identity is not anchored to biology alone, but to the unbroken continuity of perception across universes. Death as an absolute ending might exist in theory, but subjectively, it's unreachable, like trying to look at the back of your own head without a mirror. Critics often say this sounds too convenient, like wishful thinking in disguise. But ask yourself, what's more convenient? That death is the one exception in a universe where every possibility plays out, or that your awareness follows the path where it doesn't collapse? One answer fits the physics, the other fits our fear. Which is truly the illusion? This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes a paradise. Continuation could be messy, painful, full of trials. Survival isn't the same as bliss. But if continuation is inevitable, then our deepest assumption, that one day we simply stop, might be nothing but a story we tell ourselves. And here's the paradox. If the finality of death is an illusion, then maybe the most frightening thing isn't dying at all, but realizing you can never escape living. If we're going to treat this idea seriously, we need more than imagination.
We need an evidence ladder, 4 rungs, each one grounded in what we actually know about physics, consciousness, and logic. It won't prove the theory, but it will show why it can't be dismissed so easily. Step 1. The collapse problem. Quantum mechanics has never told us why or how the collapse of possibilities happens.
Does the universe truly pick one outcome, or do all outcomes exist simultaneously in separate universes? The many worlds interpretation is a direct attempt to solve this mystery. It doesn't add magic, it removes it. Instead of asking why probabilities collapse, it says, they don't. Every possibility exists somewhere. That's not mysticism. It's a sober scientific alternative. Step 2. The continuity of consciousness. Neuroscience still struggles to define what consciousness is. But one thing is clear. Consciousness is never aware of non-being. You can experience altered states, memory gaps, even blackouts, but the experience of nothingness itself is impossible. From your perspective, awareness always jumps to the next available frame. If physical processes generate endless possible continuations, then subjectively, you'd only ever notice the branches where awareness persists. Step 3. Anthropic reasoning. This is the idea that the universe must be consistent with your existence, because if it weren't, you wouldn't be here to ask the question. Applied to many worlds, it means you can only ever find yourself in universes where you survive. In all the countless versions where you don't, there is no observer to notice. So of course your experience selects the universes in which death never arrives. It's not magic. It's logical selection bias written into the structure of existence. Step 4. Experimental hints. While we don't have direct proof of universe-jumping consciousness, modern physics has already confirmed that particles can tunnel through barriers, teleport information across space, and exist in entanglement across vast distances. In 2022 and 2023, researchers even managed to simulate tiny versions of time reversal in quantum systems, where particles appear to undo their past state. If particles can do things that defy classical death sentences, why not larger processes like consciousness? The boundaries between physics and philosophy are thinner than we think. Stack these 4 steps, and the ladder reaches a shocking vista. Death may not be a wall, but a doorway into another branch of reality. And if so, then the one question we never dare ask becomes unavoidable. If you can never stop experiencing survival, does that mean you are destined to outlive not only death, but the universe itself? If death is not an end, but a shift into another universe, then the shockwave isn't just scientific, it's existential. Because suddenly, the deepest anchor of meaning humanity has ever known, the certainty of mortality, begins to dissolve. Every culture, every religion, every philosophy has built itself on the inevitability of death. Remove that, and the entire architecture of human thought trembles. For some, the idea is liberating. If you never truly die, then existence itself is proof of an unbreakable continuity. Fear of annihilation, gone. Death becomes nothing more than a trick of perspective, like the horizon that always seems to recede as you walk closer. Life would be a series of universes unfolding, with you always at the center, always continuing. That sounds comforting, but here's the darker flip. If you can't die, then you also can't escape. Immortality stops being a blessing and becomes a prison. Imagine carrying every wound, every regret, every consequence, not just once, but across infinite continuations. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries in different guises. Nietzsche spoke of the eternal recurrence, the terrifying thought of living your life, exactly as it is, over and over forever. The many worlds twist is even stranger. You wouldn't repeat the same life, but you would never stop living some life. There's no exit door. Critics argue this is anthropocentric arrogance. The universe doesn't owe you survival, they say. Consciousness might not stick to the branches where you live. It could simply end, like a candle extinguished. But the counter is unsettlingly simple. You can't experience that extinguishing. It may exist from an outside perspective, but never from the inside. And since you are always inside, always the subject, the continuity interpretation has a stubborn resilience. Then comes the ethical quake. If you are always continuing, do your choices matter more or less? On one hand, every dangerous act spawns a version of you that doesn't survive, but you never live in that version. So maybe risk doesn't matter at all. On the other hand, every choice creates universes where you suffer the fallout. And since you always continue, maybe you are condemned to live through all consequences eventually. The shockwave is this. Death is no longer the great equalizer. It's no longer the final punctuation mark. Instead, it's a comma, an endless continuation into realities you cannot predict. And if that's true, then the real question isn't, what happens when I die? But, what kind of universes am I creating for myself to live through forever? Because if death is just a shift, then every decision you make echoes into infinity, and you will always be there to face it. If death is not final but simply a shift, then the future of humanity takes on a strange new horizon. Because suddenly, the most urgent frontier of science isn't just extending life, it's understanding what it means to never lose it. Imagine what this does to medicine. Today, we pour billions into life extension, anti-aging, and digital immortality projects. But if consciousness already persists across universes, then immortality is not something to be engineered. It's already baked into the fabric of existence. The real question becomes, how do we navigate it? Future neuroscience might attempt to map the quantum signature of consciousness. Physicists are already exploring whether brain processes rely on quantum effects, microtubules, entanglement, tunneling at the neuronal level. If true, it could explain why awareness seems continuous, never fragmenting into nothingness. Technology could emerge not to prevent death, but to steer which universes you land in. Think of it. Instead of being tossed randomly into whatever survival branch occurs, you might someday choose the direction of your quantum continuity. This idea also challenges our relationship to risk. If you can never subjectively die, what does it mean to face danger? Perhaps this explains humanity's reckless drive, why we leap from cliffs with wingsuits, explore space, or gamble with our own survival. At some deep level, maybe consciousness already knows it cannot truly end. But here's the unsettling twist. You may survive every catastrophe from your perspective, but the quality of those survivals is not guaranteed. You might always wake up in the version of reality where you live, but what if it's the bleakest, most painful branch? Survival doesn't always mean salvation. And then there's the cosmic scale. If consciousness never ends, then eventually, you might outlast civilizations, stars, even galaxies. As universes evolve and collapse, your awareness would continue shifting into whichever branches still sustain it. This paints a haunting picture. One day you may find yourself as the last observer in a silent, dying cosmos, yet still persisting, still carried forward because your awareness cannot reach non-existence. This is where science collides with philosophy. Do we want to chase immortality in labs and quantum computers if it means confirming we can never escape existence? Should humanity prepare not for death, but for eternal survival? These are not questions medicine or physics has ever had to face, but they may be unavoidable if this idea proves true. And so the third cliffhanger rises. If you truly can never stop, if every universe keeps pulling you forward, then maybe the ultimate danger isn't death at all, but eternity. Let's bring this home. Forget physics papers and cosmic scales for a moment. What does this idea mean for you right now sitting here listening? If death is not an end, but a shift, then every single moment of your life carries a different weight. Because suddenly, you are not moving toward an ending. You are weaving into an endless fabric of continuations. Think about the choices you made this morning: to wake up early or stay in bed, to call someone you love or put it off, to take a risk or play it safe. If you always continue, those choices don't disappear. They echo, multiplying across realities, shaping the universes you will experience next. You aren't just living a life, you're setting the conditions for infinite lives ahead. Every path you walk creates a corridor your awareness may eventually have to travel down. That's both empowering and terrifying. It means you matter more than you think. Small actions ripple outward forever. The kindness you show, the cruelty you allow, the courage you choose, all of it doesn't just end with your death. It stacks into a continuity that you yourself will keep living through. If there is no ultimate void, then your story is not about how it ends, but about how it unfolds again and again. And maybe this is the hidden invitation. If you can't stop existing, then the only real power you have is over the quality of that existence. You can't control which universes split off, but you can control which ones you seed with meaning, beauty, or destruction. Imagine knowing that in every branch where you continue, you've left yourself with something worth carrying. That changes how you see responsibility. You're not just living for others, you're living for every future you. Of course, not everyone wants this. The thought of endless survival can feel suffocating. The idea that you might wake up in harsher and harsher versions of reality, war, loss, collapse, can be overwhelming. But here's the counter. Maybe the fact that you're hearing these words in this universe means that awareness already has a bias towards survival with meaning. Maybe the universes that carry forward are the ones where you can still learn, grow, and adapt. So, the human thread is this. You don't need to wait for proof that death is a shift. You can live as if it is. Treat each moment as one ripple in an infinite chain of continuations. Create universes you'd actually want to wake up in. Because if you're destined to always open your eyes somewhere, make sure the world you see is one worth living in. Picture this. You're walking through a forest at dusk. The path splits again and again, trails bending out of sight, each one vanishing into the trees. You can only choose one at a time, but the forest doesn't care. It holds them all. That's what your life might be. Death isn't the end of the trail. It's just another fork, another path you step onto without realizing it. You don't vanish into the dark. You keep walking somewhere else. If that's true, then the finality we fear most may be the greatest illusion of all. You may never face a blank wall. You may never find yourself in silence forever. Instead, you always open your eyes, always breathe again, always continue in a reality that still holds you. And maybe that's why life feels so impossibly fragile yet endlessly resilient. Because it's not a single thread. It's a network of trails, and you are always moving along one. But here's the real challenge. If you can't end, then what do you do with that? Do you see it as liberation, proof that you are unbreakable? Or do you see it as a burden, that you can never rest, never escape? The answer might depend on how you live right now. The choices you make, the meaning you build, the love you give, those are the things that echo forward. They are what you will keep meeting on the other side of every fork. So I leave you with this. If death is just a shift, then life is an endless series of arrivals. You are not walking toward an ending. You are walking toward yourself over and over again. Do you believe this quantum idea changes everything? Or is it just science fiction? Tell me below. Your view might change someone's mind.